defining the requirements for high-speed boats. So as an organisation, one of the first things you should be doing is asking yourself the questions, what do our new boat, or what does our boat need to be able to do? Now, unfortunately, in the industry, we've seen too many times when people have just gone out based on a bit of gut feel and make it up as we go, and they've chosen their boats without really doing a detailed analysis of the requirements. So who am I? James Wilton. I currently live in Dubai, where I'm a consultant for the UAE military there. I've been formerly as a squadron commander in the SAS in Australia, and over the last few years I've been privileged enough to be involved with a number of boat projects and introducing a few different types of boats. So in the last couple of years I've developed it's like a 7-step process, almost project management for boats made easy for dummies. Now, the project management is a long course. It's a detailed training program. I know in the Australian military context, it's a 12-month program. So I'm going to summarise 12 months into 10 minutes. So let me talk to you about my first experience defining the requirements for a boat. So I was 15 years old, and my father said, you can have your first boat. So of course, I'm pretty happy with that. I thought, well, what sort of boat am I going to hit? So I need to look at my requirements. The first thing is, I need to be able to ski behind it, importantly. My second requirement was I need to have a loud stereo system so I could play music while I'm driving the boat. And my third requirement, most importantly, I had to look good for the girls. Well, with those 3 requirements, I was off shopping for my first boat. So, if only boat procurement was that simple, 3 requirements and we're off. So what I'm trying to do is look at how we then lay out those requirements for a more complex boat. So today, our boats and our boat operators are being asked to go further than before, faster than before, and harder than before. So to ensure we buy the right boat for our users, our operators, as an organisation, we need to go through a detailed analysis process. And that leads to us producing, as an organisation, an operational requirements document. Now, different organisations have different terms for this document. But basically, the start point for your organisation to list what you want your boat to do. This is a document you can take to the boat builder, you can use to test against, you can use it to select your boat from. And it's probably it's just an important start point when we look at boat procurement. So this document defines what we want to do within our operating environment. So it's going to have limitations in it as well. So the process itself, as I said, I've come up with 7 steps just to help define it. You can do it any way you want. These steps are all interlinked. You can see them there. We go through our problem, what our capability gap is, what the concept of operations is, look at our roles and tasks. That sets the framework for then what we come up with is developing a more detailed solution, where we start to look at the performance of the boat, the selection criteria and how we select for it, and then, of course, what support elements we need. So we'll spend a bit of time on that first part, and I'll briefly cover the last part of those points there. So what does success look like when we're procuring a boat? Ultimately, it's being able to select a boat that can do its operational mission within its defined operational environment. So I've got a video coming up now which shows a live operation by an Australian SAS troop a number of years ago now. It was a Chinese commercial vessel that actually had been infiltrated by Chinese mafia. They were doing drug running from it, and in fact, body washed up at shore. They had thrown overboard. So the SAS were called in and asked to conduct a recovery operation. We call it SUR, Ship Underway Recovery. You might call it VBSS. Have a look at the sea state. It's pretty extreme. I think it was 5 to 6 on that one. Don't get distracted by the helicopter. Have a look at the guys climbing up to the side. See the rib down the side here?
You want to keep on this side, Mossy? Yeah, if you can. Yeah, I'll fast track it. Just over on this side. Can you see him, Griffo? They're fast roping down there? No, I can't see him. Oh, yeah, I can see him actually. Yep. Oops. One's up. Yep, that's slipped off.
Okay, you can see the side, that's pretty big seas, pretty tough conditions. So in the SAS, we'd had a 10-metre rib at that stage, but of course the rib was based on the west coast. This mission took place on the east coast. That's a 5.5-hour flight away. So we ended up having to use the naval boats, I think they were Zodiac, that were on board the frigate at the time. So all the years spent training with our own boats, and that's the one we had to use. But you've got to make it work, haven't you? So lucky enough, those boats had actually been designed for boarding or limited boarding operations. The guys had the skill, a bit like Andreas was saying. They were good coxswains that made a bad boat look good. But in those conditions, if we hadn't selected the right boat to train with, or the right boat hadn't been selected for the frigate, that mission may not have occurred. Right, let's walk through this process quickly so you can see how the flow of information happens. So firstly, we get our team together. So of course, we're going to have a team of experts. At this stage, you may have consultants, you may have operational planners, you may have your capability development guys, you're going to have policy makers all together, and you're defining the problem. So in project management, defining the problem is considered the most crucial task of all. And a lot of experts say you actually should spend most of your time on defining the problem, so you get that right. If you get this wrong at the start, you're going to end up with the wrong boat if you haven't worked out what it needs to do. So we look at what do we need our new boat to do, or what can't our current boat do? Now, assisting us define the problem, we look at the capability gap. What's the mismatch between what we need to be able to do and what we currently do? So you may or may not have a boat that does or doesn't do the task. Maybe it's gone out of date. Maybe there's been a change in policy that you need to do something else with your boat. So we identify what that gap is. So we're starting to force ourselves into a process of analysis before we look at the type of boat. So a couple of things I've seen in the last few years is guys will skip this step and just go out and start driving boats. So they're trying to build experience by what's on the market rather than going back and looking at what they really need to do. And you'll end up with the wrong boat. You get sidetracked by the boat that does 50 knots rather than you need a boat that does 30 or 40 knots and can carry the right amount of people over the right distance. So let's get this right at the start. All right. Now, so an example of that too, we had another reason we might need to go back and look at a new boat is we had a change in roles. So I was with an organisation that had changed from an infantry unit into an amphibious raid force. They needed a protected boat that could land a raid force on the sea. So we went back to the start. What was the gap? What did we currently have? We had ribs, we had small inflatables. They weren't going to do the job. So what did we needed to do? We needed to land sections of men on the beach. We needed to provide fire support. We needed to protect them. So we ended up with an aluminium hull, 11-metre boat, jet-driven, with protection. And that procurement process is currently ongoing. So that was just simply identifying a gap in policy or a change in policy and then moving forward through the analysis process. So then we get up to concept of ops. This is when we do review those policies and procedures and doctrines in detail. We start pulling out of that our requirements for our range. What distance do these boats need to go? What's our endurance requirements? What's our deployment methods? Do we need to go from a mothership? Are we just simply launching from the beach? Let's start pulling those out. And we still, at this stage, haven't thought about the end design of the boat. We're pulling the right information out. Then we get into the nitty-gritty. What are these roles and tasks we're going to do? So we're continuing further to develop what is the solution before we design the boat. So here we pull out, do you need to deliver a special forces team onto a moving ship? Are you doing an interdiction operation? Are you using it for coastal surveillance or search and rescue? Let's define those tasks and list them out. Everything this boat needs to be able to do. So ultimately, we've studied our background, we've studied our policies, our procedures, and now we can start developing the solution. Now, I'll have another comment about the composition of the team. Some organisations, where I've been guilty of as well, have involved end users and operators at the very early stages of this analysis. And what we've found is that end users and operators are great on the tiller, they know how to drive a boat, but they may not necessarily understand policy. So I had a young guy tell me that we'd pulled out of the policy that we needed to airdrop this new rib. And he turned around and he said, no, we don't need to do that, we've never done it before. Now, he didn't understand the policy or the implications of the government on what they wanted that craft to do. So if it had been full of end users, this team, we would have had a boat that couldn't do an airdrop. So just be careful there. So I'd say at this stage now, once you've outlined your requirements of the boat, then get the end users involved. Let them start looking at things such as, defining the performance parameters. Now we can start looking at maybe what sort of hull and structure we want, what shock mitigation and weapon systems we want, what nav systems do we want. Communications, big one. And of course, then their human interface systems. We definitely want to get our end users involved here. So I want to talk about that human interface because I think it's an important point, and particularly as these boats are being asked to do more. They're becoming more and more multi-role. So I'll walk through an example again of what we did with the new rib we came up with. We identified we had a lot of requirements for this rib. It's a very busy console, as you can see in the end. But the organisation needed 5 different communication systems alone. We needed to have FLIR systems. We need to have multiple mapping systems. We needed to have places for weapons and gauges. So what we did, we actually asked Dr. Allman to get involved. We said, hey, here's all our problems. We don't know how to fit it into an 11-metre rib console. So he came up with a mock-up. That mock-up was sent to the boat builder, Boomerranger in Finland, and they developed a mock-up for us. So as a project team with end users, with policy advisors, with consultants, we flew to Finland and we sat around this mock-up and we went through the different scenarios. So we went back to our operational requirement document, we detailed our scenarios and we played them out from the console's and the driver's perspective. So we built the working platform around the human to make sure he could reach things, he could see things. So for example, let's look at the helm here. So dials. So I think when we first got there, or one of the boats we saw someone had built, they'd put the dials for different engines left and right, port and starboard. Can that make sense? Because okay, the port gauge is for the port engine, but you don't look at those dials separately. You look at them together. So we squashed the two. Each of the two are paired up. Your gauges are paired up. We put all the function switches down below. They don't need to be in sight. So we've popped them behind in some spare space behind the helm. Gauges at both the navigator and coxswain need to operate are in the centre here, intercoms, various marine band radios as well in the centre. And then, of course, our charting and navigation systems in front of the navigator. We had to build in a FLIR handle as well here. We had to build in, you can't see how you see the top of a gun there, gun mounts for the operators as well there. Lots of grab rails, really user-friendly. We're getting belted around when they grab on. And the rails extend around the touch screens. If you ever try to touch a touch screen when you're underway, you're not going to get it right. You need your hand to lean against something to be able to accurately press your touch screen. So little things like that. We spent the time building the console around the guys operating it. I think we've come up with a pretty good design, and we'll see that on the down on the Boomerranger boats there as well. So you're going to get them involved. Think about that human factors. Some of the accidents we've seen both on the water in boats and on land, generally about the human factor interface. And for my region, one of the examples was the Americans, they shot down an Iranian civilian aircraft in 1988, if you remember, in the Gulf. And when the reports came back about what occurred there, how did they shoot that down when they thought it was a fighter plane, it was actually about the human interface design was off. The system wasn't designed around the person. So we can learn from that. Let's make sure they're involved here. Right, selection. So if we've got this requirements document, the beauty about that is it lists everything your boat needs to do. So when you go to select it, and Andres has got some more details there, just select the boat and test it against your document. You don't need to come up with a new detailed plan. You've got the outline of it there. So what we did here, and another example, what we did, we identified that our new ribs had to carry 2.5 tonne, 2,500 kilos. So we're about to test the Boomerranger boat, and as an organisation, we've been running around and testing boats empty. So I rang up Mika and I said, right, mate, we need 2.5 tonne in the boat. And he was a bit concerned, and he said, oh, hold on, you haven't tested any other boats with 2.5 tonne. And I said, well, if your boat can do the job, you're going to be well set up, and you can show us it can carry the load and perform to our requirements. So you can see here, what did we do? The guys just strapped on a tonne of water, and then we put 12 operators in there, and we gave us our weight. So the other requirement was it had to operate at 30 knots in sea state 3 with the weight. Now you can see that's not sea state 3. So what did we do? We went down and chased ferries. So we went into the wake of the ferries to feel what it's like through the chop of the ferries. Mika also organised a barge boat going in and out so we could do some coming alongside drills, because one of our requirements was for ease of handling during ship underway recovery or boarding operations. So we used, we set ourselves up for success to see how the boat handled. And funny enough, Boomerranger won the tender in the end. Right, so the last step is then developing your through-life support plan. So now, whilst not necessarily part of setting up your requirements, what should drop out of your requirements is the need for your maintenance and servicing plan, because you're bringing in a new craft, your support equipment, what new trailers, what new trucks do you need to tow these things, what extra training are you going to need, transportation, facilities, force structure. And in another example, back in Australia, when we brought a new rib in, what we didn't realise was we had to change the force structure. Our traditional model, and most people's model, is a two-man crew, coxswain and navigator or commander. What we found was, because of the type of missions we're doing, no fail missions, we actually needed to take a marine mechanic out with us. So our whole force structure changed from a 20-man troop operating 10 boats to a 30-man troop operating 10 boats. Now, in the military, to change a force structure like that takes years, and I think we're still catching, or the guys are probably still catching up, because we didn't think about that early on, and we didn't put that into the program. So think about your force structure change. That's about it. I just wanted to whip through those points. Let me say in conclusion, you need to get back to, we say, grassroots. Go back and do the analysis. It's not exciting work. It's a detailed analysis process. It's about going through and combing through policies and doctrine and procedures and lessons learned with the right people and a project team and getting them all sitting around in one spot. It's not exciting stuff. You want to get out and drive boats. I've got it. At the right point, when you've done that analysis, everything else will flow out of that. And I think we'll avoid seeing these accidents. And things we've seen in our industry recently, I guarantee if you went back and did the accident investigation, you'll see one of these steps will have been missed. They will have jumped one, or they won't have done the correct testing. They won't have selected the boat properly. They won't have detailed all the operating requirements and parameters and sea states and durations that these craft need to do. And again, Dr. Ullman, he's identified this as an issue in the industry, so he has put together a team of professionals that can help you with this. So I think if you contact him, you can look at assistance through HSBO Pro. If you want a copy of a templated operational requirements document, I've got that. I've put it together over the last couple of years. It's a English document where you can fill in all these parts, and I've got a lot of details and guidelines there to help you, dot points to help you think through the process. So if you want a copy of that, just email me and I'll send you back a copy. I can do that tonight, or as you email it through, just say you'd like a copy of the document. Email is firstname@firstnamelastname.com, so james@jameswilton.com. So I'll send it through. I think as an industry, we can make sure we follow this detailed analysis process to ensure at the end we get these multi-role boats correct for our end users and stop these accidents. Thank you.